Whether you're coaching youth football, high school, semi-pro, internationally, or flag, the way that you build out your playbook can make or break your season. In this video, I'm going to show you how you can create a playbook that's adaptable, effective, and easy to implement no matter what level you're coaching at. But before we get started, the first thing we need to do is define some goals for your playbook. So let's go ahead and do that. It needs to be easy for your players to learn, so one size does not fit all here, but there are a few common things that we need to consider. It also needs to be practical for your level. It has to have solutions for every major problem that you're going to face, and it needs to work. So it's not really a good playbook unless you score points. Now, I generally approach playbook design in the same way every single time. The level of detail that you're going to get into is obviously going to be adjusted based on the level that you're at, but this video should help to serve as a guide and give you a solid process for everything. So here's how the rest of this video is going to go. My process for creating a playbook is set up in 10 different steps. We're going to talk through each of those steps, and I'm going to try to give you a solid understanding of each one. And at the end of this video, I have a very cool resource that I want to share with you that's going to make this process 500 times simpler. No, I haven't done the math on that, but it's probably close. All right, so let's get going. Alrighty guys, so we're gonna go ahead and work through all 10 of these steps. This is step 1 here, defining the offensive philosophy. I'll try to do this as efficient as possible just to make sure I'm not taking up too much of your time, but I want you to have enough information here that you can actually walk away with something very practical. So first of all, when it comes to the offensive philosophy, let's think about the purpose. Why do we have this? Because we need to have that North Star, right? That's what we want to do. It's going to help guide everything else that you do moving forward. So you want to define that philosophy early on before you start building everything else, right? This is the foundation. Okay, this is going to establish how you want to attack the defense. Okay, you want to attack the defense. Everybody's going to have their own little spin on it, right? So if you have no idea, off the top of your head, go through and answer a lot of these questions. And in general, if you study different offensive systems, this will help give you an understanding of how you can attack essentially, cover 2, cover 3. What are you doing to beat cover 4? What are you doing against a 4-man front, 3-man front? So there's a lot of stuff that you can get into with this, but you want to just try and get a general idea of this at the beginning. You can dive into stuff later on down the road, a little bit more in depth. And then one of the things to think about here is that this will help give your players a why, okay? Give you and your players, but to me, it's really about the players. I want to be able to teach my guys like, hey, this is why we're doing this concept, right? Anytime you're trying to teach somebody something, if you give them the why, that's a lot more important, right? That's why we have this. This is really the why of why we're defining our offensive philosophy. Okay, these are the purposes for that. So this really helps to drive in the knowledge for your players who might not be as nerdy about football as you are. Okay, so that's going to be important. Step-by-step process, pretty simple. So we're going to answer a list of targeted questions. Here are the questions. We're not going to go through them. Pause the video, take a screenshot, whatever you need, and go through these. So you can do that individually or as a staff. Ideally, it's better with more minds. The more people who are able to think about these things, the better. But you might not necessarily have another coach on staff, so it might just be you. That's not a problem either. Next thing, write those answers down, okay? It's going to be an important part. You have to organize your thoughts a little bit more. Just saying it is not really enough. I really like the idea of writing them down because you're gonna see where there's gaps in your ability to explain something, okay? Then you want to organize them into a format that you're actually able to give to your players. And then the last thing would be just sharing it with them in that format that is really easily accessible for them. I don't just have this written down somewhere in an Excel document or a Word document. This is in the playbook, right? I put this, my offensive philosophy, you should put this in your playbook so your players have access to it as you move forward. Again, we're not going to cover these questions, but go through these. It's going to really help you to define this philosophy. Another thing with this, there's no one way to set this up. You can look at 30, 40 different playbooks, and they're going to have a little bit of a different wrinkle on how they want to set up the offensive philosophy. So there's not one set way to do it. Whatever works for you, whatever gets the point across, that's what you need. Alrighty, so next step here, we're going to define our personnel groups, okay? So goals of this. You want your system to stay the same every single year. What you don't want is you set up an offense, you go through, you spend so much time on it, and then next season you have a couple people leave, some new people coming in, and now all of a sudden you have to completely change the entire system. That's not what you want. You just want to adapt it year after year. The way to do that is to set up your offense in a way that it can run, it can operate with different personnel packages. Okay, so maybe one year you have to be more two back. Okay, in another year, you need to be empty. You can still run the same type of concepts for the most part. There's going to be obviously differences, but you can essentially set up your offense in a way that it'll operate with multiple personnel packages. Okay, so the next thing here, we want to design these personnels to make sure that we have our best 11 on the field. If you're going to be in a goal line situation, you don't want to be empty all the time or 10 personnel all the time. If you want to at least have a big body in there. You might even have somebody, it might be 11 personnel. You might not have a tight end, a good tight end body who can block and catch. You might not have that, but if you've got an extra offensive lineman, you can design your personnel to put him in, and it's essentially just going to be, we're running the ball. If we're in 11 personnel, we have a tight end or a big body type of player on the field, we're just going to be running the ball. You can do that, right? There's no saying that you can't. Just because NFL tight ends or college tight ends have a certain role that does not need to apply to you. You can set it up however you'd like. Okay, so in general, make sure your best 11 are on the field, and then try to set these up in a way that you can get your best athletes the ball in space. Okay, that's going to be a critical part as you move forward, looking at your game planning, your play calling. Getting the ball to your athletes in space is extremely important. So just keep this in mind early on, okay, while we're setting these things up. All right, now next part, step-by-step process. So first one, we're going to decide on the personnel package that we want to carry. We're going to analyze our talent. We need to mesh what we want with what we have, right? Maybe we want to run 20 personnel, but we don't have 2 stud running backs, okay? Maybe that's just not a good idea. Maybe we want to be real big and heavy and have a double tight end package, but we don't really have that, okay? So that's not something that we would be able to do. So you have to make sure that you always mesh what you want with what you have. The next step is to actually define these packages, right? So give them a name. It could really be as simple as calling out 10, 11. You don't have to have a specific name for it. A lot of teams they'll just have a signal, a hand signal. If they raise one fist in the air, it means 10 personnel. If they do 2 fists, it means whatever it is. So you can set it up to where you have a simple name. You could have a code word for it. In college, I think we used something like Charger or Cheetah or something like that. So we just had multiple names for the different personnel packages. Again, no set way to do it, right? You just, set it up however you'd like. And that's actually kind of part of the last one here, defining the communication system. So these are the steps here. If you're totally unfamiliar with this, this is just a little idea for it. So 0 personnel is going to be 0 running back, 0 tight ends. 10 personnel, okay, you got the little guy here raising his hand. 1 running back, 0 tight ends, okay? Imagine that there's a third number in here for all of these things, and whatever that number is going to be the number of receivers, and the total number always equals 5. So 0 plus 0 plus 5 equals 5. If you have 5 here, so 5 plus 1 plus 0, that would be a 4. So you have 4 receivers, okay? It's an easy way to kind of remember that with that third number there. But in general, these are just some of the personnel packages that you can use. You don't want to use all of them, most likely. I've never been in an offense that actually used every single personnel package. I think that's probably saved for college NFL teams. You don't really need that. Basically what I've used before is empty. I've used 10, I've used 11, and then sometimes you'll get into 12 personnel. Occasionally I've used 20, but that's really the extent of it. Anytime I was goal line, I was really mostly in the 12 personnel package. So I never really used these packages. You can, for sure, right? They weren't in my offense, okay? So I was able to have some level of success without that. So you want to be as complicated as you need to be. That's really the idea. Okay, so next thing here, we want to create our formations and formation tags. Now, before I dive into a ton of this stuff, I have a full video, how to create your offensive naming system for American football. And I talk about formations in there. It's towards the end of the video, but I get into a lot of detail with that. So I'm not going to spend too much time here. If you want to watch that, go and watch this YouTube video. It'll explain a lot of this stuff. But let's go ahead and take a look at our goals here. So you want to build your formations in a way that allows you freedom in your play design. You don't want to be stuck and say like, okay, well, we only have 2x2. We only have 3x1. Whatever it is, you want to make sure that you build this out in a way that gives you the ability to tag something, okay, or move somebody, be a little bit more multiple with your formations. That's going to be important. You don't necessarily have to run a ton of different concepts, but if you can run a few concepts in a ton of different ways, that's really easy to do, okay? And that causes issues for the defense while keeping things simple for you as an offensive coordinator and for your players. All right, the next thing we want to make sure that we keep the system simple for the players. If it gets too complex, you're going to play slow. You're going to have a ton of mistakes. You don't want that, okay? This is, of course, going to be different depending on what level you're at. All right, so next thing here, the formation setup, essentially what we choose, right? If we use minimal base formations and many tags, okay, that's one option. And then there's also many base formations with minimal tags. Again, watch the video, but the idea is the setup you choose should match the tempo that you want to operate. So if you're going to have very long things where you have to say spread, right, and then tag something, now you've got 3 different words that you're using, and versus having a system where you can get whatever that is with only 2 words, you shorten the play call. If you shorten the play call with just the formations, you also do that with the concept tags, with everything else. If you set up the whole offense to be longer, don't expect to be very fast tempo. But if you set up your play calls to where the names are going to be short, you can go a little bit faster, right? So that's the idea. Make sure the way that you set up your formations should match the tempo, okay? Easy thing. Now we can take a look at the step-by-step process. So decide on the types of formations that you really need, okay? Again, we talk about the formations, we talk about the personnel groups over here. You know, I did not need anything below this. So I did not need to really think about having all those different formation tags in there, those base formations. Okay, so decide on the types of formations you need. Decide on the base structure, right? That's this. Are you going to be many base formations, minimal tags, or are you going to be minimal base formations with many tags? Okay, pick one of those. Create your base formations, okay? Try to be as detailed as possible with those. Make sure the players know, hey, where am I lining up? If I'm a receiver, am I top of numbers? Am I bottom of numbers, right? Make sure you have that information in there. Same thing, running back stance, where are they at? Are they splitting the inside leg of the guard at 6 yards? What's the alignment there? Next thing here, create your formation tags, okay? And try to give examples. If you're gonna say, hey, this tag moves you to this spot, give examples in the playbook so the players get a chance to know what that looks like. So if you look at this example here, so east, this is a base formation. Out would be a tag word. So that tells him to go from here and line up out here. East over tells him to go from here to here, okay? Those are tags, so you can have those examples in there. And then you want to create the naming system for all of that, right? So take it from paper and actually apply a name to it so you can start operating and start coming up with play call names. Alrighty, so next step, we're going to be step 4, defining our procedures. Here's an example of the no huddle procedure, okay? This is an example of what this looks like when I install this with my offense. This is the card that I have on huddle. This is in the install that they actually see. So you can see there's little notes for everything, right? I have a specific thing for the offensive line. I show where the coach is. I give any key points that I want, and then I have the actual process here so everybody has a chance to actually read through it and kind of work through an example in their head. Now, when we look at the goals, this is about increasing the efficiency by streamlining your processes. What you don't want, something that happened to me early on in my career, where I had all this stuff with a playbook, get out on the field, and it's like, okay, it's time to call the play. It's like, what's the process right now? And that was a very embarrassing moment where it's like, I haven't defined this yet, right? So that was my very first year ever doing any type of coaching, but you want to make sure that you actually have that process defined, and then the next level is streamlining it, right? Improving it, make sure that it's as efficient as it possibly can be. All right, another thing, anytime you have these processes defined, it's going to increase your players' confidence, because when, things are going crazy and it's a 2-minute drill or whatever it is, you already have these processes defined. If we know how to clock the ball, we've practiced it, it's mapped out exactly how we clock the ball, we're going to have confidence in those moments. We're not going to be panicked about it, okay? So we're going to reduce mistakes, and we're going to increase our players' confidence. Next one here, we want to maximize the adaptability and flexibility in different situations, right? So we get to the red zone, maybe we want to use a different tempo, right? Maybe that's going to be really effective here. Or if we have a big first down, if we don't have a NASCAR package installed with that procedure mapped out, what does that look like, right? If we get a big gain and we want to run up to the line, run inside zone, outside, whatever it is that we want to run, we have to have that mapped out. That's going to really help our team. All right, and now we can take a look at the step-by-step process. So what we're going to do is we're going to list out all of our procedures, okay? No huddle, signaling the play call, clocking the ball, kneeling, everything, okay? Write it all down so then you can start to define it. Okay, then think from a player's perspective and write down every question that they might have. So then you can answer that, right? If you're a running back, this is something that we've always done. If we're trying to clock the ball, then I've always told my running back, I don't care where you line up. You can literally get set. If we get a big 30-yard gain, you can get set where you're at. I don't care, because we're going to go up there and we're going to clock the ball. Obviously, we don't ever do that, but that running back knows, and sometimes you'll see that in practice. If it's a big gain, they might just get set wherever they're at on the field as long as they're off the ball, just because they know that they can do that, okay? Next thing, we're going to answer, refine, and document, okay? You have to create those standard operating procedures for each of these. This would be that process right here. So we're going to answer it, we're going to refine it, we're going to document it, okay? And then, again, we're going to refine and improve it along the way. So as you continue going through any situation, you're going to realize maybe there's a little bit of a tweak that we need to make with this process. Maybe we need to be a little bit more clear. We need to add something, take something out. It's too complex. All that stuff. It's just, this is the process, right? It's just adjusting, it's refining things and improving them as you go. Alrighty, next step, we have creating the concept bucket. So here's an example of a concept bucket. So if you're not familiar with what that is, essentially what we're going to do is we're going to look at different concept types. So this is RPOs, quick games, dropbacks, shots, moving pocket. I don't have screens on here, but there would be another section for screens. I just cut it off here. But essentially, you're going to write down all the different things that you want to use within each umbrella. Okay, so quick game, hoss, spacing, smash, snag, line drag, that's a double slant or slant flat, stick, okay, and a slot fade with a slant underneath. I don't really know exactly what that's called. I think I've called that under in other videos. Dan Casey calls this Slade. I asked him about that because I didn't know what the hell to call it. So he gave me that one and I just kind of stole it. So thank you. Drop back here. So essentially you're going to pick whatever it is that you're going to use, and that is going to be the base of your offense. So you can, if you think about it like this, you can run flood a ton of different ways, right? You can run flood 15 different ways in your offense, but it's still flood, okay? It's still that concept. Now, depending on what level you're at, you might not need this many concepts, okay? This to me is actually quite a good amount of concepts to use in an offense, right? So you just have to decide that for your team, you know, what level you're at, how complex do you really want to be with this, how many concepts do you want to use. But now let's stop looking over here. Let's talk about the purpose. So this is going to narrow our focus as an offense, and it prevents shiny object syndrome. Keep that in mind, because you're going to see something online. Go on Dan Casey's Instagram account and you're going to see some real shiny objects. You're like, oh man, I wish I could steal that, find a way to put it in my offense. Probably don't need to, right? I don't need another quick game. I have enough quick games. I have enough drop back concepts. I don't need more of them, right? So it narrows your focus. It prevents this, which is a killer for most OCs. They just keep adding stuff and it just doesn't make sense. It doesn't fit in with their philosophy. It doesn't fit in with their system because it's just stolen from somebody else's and they haven't really thought everything through, okay? All right, this gets the staff on the same page as well. So we all know what our concepts are. We all know how we are using, you know, if we get cover 4, we know what we're going to use to attack cover 4, okay? Everybody's on the same page with that. This also lays the foundation for defining your techniques and your blocking rules. So when you think about the pass protections, if you have a big on big, you have a half slide, full slide, all those things are going to have different blocking rules. And with every single concept, there are different techniques. Okay, if you think about a man blocking scheme versus a zone blocking scheme, the offensive line has different techniques that they're executing when they're using those blocks. So you have to have this all set up. You do this for your run game as well, not just the pass game, but you do this for both run and pass, and that's going to help guide what techniques you really need to teach. Okay, and then you can try to simplify things as you move forward. Okay, and this is also going to help with your installation just to keep things a little bit more organized. All right, step-by-step process here. So brainstorm and create a list of all the concepts you want to run. Fill out your concept bucket template. That would be this, okay? And then recheck it to make sure that it fits your level. And a step 4 that I didn't include here, delete stuff, okay? I have terrible handwriting, but you get the idea. Delete stuff, all right? You probably don't need as much. I might not even need all of this, what I'm carrying, okay? There's been times where we go in and we just don't use a certain concept as much, so we end up not using it. There's been times, I mean, most game plans, we don't use every concept that's in our concept bucket. Okay, there's usually one or two things that we leave out. If we leave it out enough, then we remove it. Okay, that's the idea. But if we end up coming back like curl, this one last year, for some reason, we just weren't able to execute it properly. So this one was actually taken out of our game plan. Okay, so we just weren't using that. But and weak flood as well. We weren't too successful with the weak flood. Okay, but I've had years before where we were super successful with both of these. So they were both in the game plan. They're both in my system, right? And I still teach them. But that does not mean that I have to use them for every single game plan. Okay, that's a whole separate thing. Right now we're talking concept buckets here. Okay, but now we're going to move on to the next part. Okay, we talked about that here, right? Where is it at here? It's going to help with defining the blocking rules. Okay, so now our next step, we want to define those blocking rules. So why you need to define these rules, okay? Again, ensure your players understand. If your offensive line does not understand how you want to run power, you're screwed. It doesn't matter if you know how to run power. If you don't have very clear rules that tell your players what to do, they're not going to be able to execute it, right? So this is why you need to define these, okay? It also allows you to solve any problem that you're going to see. So these rules right here, okay, if you go through and you are playing against a different front, you might need to have a different set of rules. You might need to have an adjustment. So if we play a 3-down lineman versus a 3-down line versus a 4-man front, those are slightly different rules for power. It's not the exact same rules for each one. Okay, so if it was, I mean, for me, we would man up the defensive end here. Okay, so that's going to change. It's not going to be that gap down. Okay, it's not going to be that gap responsibility here anymore. It's going to be a combination of a gap scheme and a man scheme. Okay, so you have to adapt that a little bit. And the last thing here is this is going to have a large ripple effect when you make changes. So let's say you get into a game, you're playing against a front. That's something you have to make an adjustment in the middle of the game. And we say, okay, well, how about this, right? We're struggling. We're really struggling with getting any type of lateral push. So let's take our inside zone rules and say, okay, well, we've practiced this before. Don't change stuff like this fundamentally if you haven't practiced it. But if you've really practiced it and you say, okay, well, instead of helping backside when we're uncovered, let's help play side. It's going to completely change something, right? It's a completely different type of flow. You get much more lateral flow than vertical flow on an inside zone. But you can change a rule, okay? If you're uncovered, help play side versus if you're uncovered, help backside. That rule change has a massive impact. So you can make a small change and it can have a large impact if you want it to, okay? Don't, use that for, accept what it is, right? It has a positive impact, but it also can have a very negative impact if you use it incorrectly. So again, don't change a rule if you haven't practiced it, but just keep that in mind. All right, step-by-step process. You want to draw everything versus as many fronts as you can. I generally draw them from 6 different fronts. So I'll do an over and under. I'll do a 3-4 tight, a 3-4 wide. So I call that as an eagle and okie. You could do a bare front, and you could do like a double mug with two backers in both of these A gaps, and 3 techs, and then 5 techs. Okay, so you could do those 6 different fronts, and you can also add a 3-3 stack in there as well. But however it is, right? Define the rules, draw it versus different fronts. Okay, draw it versus different fronts, and then define rules that make sense for as many as possible. And if you have to change something, which you probably will, you'll say, okay, well, versus this front, it doesn't work. So we're going to have to add this rule tweak or this tag or whatever it is. All right, and then once you have those down, once you have those rules down, this is the part that I really like. Try to break them, right? Whatever it is, just try to break it. What front can I present that would cause a problem, right? I ran into this a couple of years ago with Duo, where a team played, it was a funky front. It was like a nose, head up, and two backers here, right? So it was like essentially 3 people in 2 gaps. And we ended up having some issue where we left one of them unblocked. It was a fumble return for touchdown. It was a crazy, crazy play. But it showed me, okay, well, I have an issue with the way that I block that. So we were able to go through and find some things that broke the rules. So now we were able to go and actually find a solution for that. Okay, and then, as I mentioned before, identify the special rules that are needed in that situation. So it's either, if we see this, we have to check to this rule. Okay, so our offensive linemen know we need to check this. Or if you see that, we get out of the play. right? We change it to something completely different because it's not going to work. It's not worth putting in all that energy, all that effort to have that new rule. We can just basically say, okay, well, let's just, if they're going to do that, let's just run toss to the field. Okay, easy audible for the offensive line, for your quarterbacks, easy thing to implement. And again, last thing here, do this with your run game and your pass game. It's not just one of them. All right, next thing here, we want to define our position-specific techniques. So this is an example. This would be a burst release. So I would put the information in here. So when we're using this, how we're using this, and then I have a little video if you don't have to do that, but something like this, just to make it more visual for the players. Okay. So the purpose gives them tools in the toolbox. I like to let my athletes make a lot of decisions. I want them to have the tools in the toolbox. If I don't provide them, then they can't make the right decisions, right? It's my responsibility to give them those tools so then they can use it. All right. Also allows us as coaches to diagnose problems. If we can see, okay, well, we're losing this block. Why are we losing this one-on-one battle? Is it a technique? Is the guy just being physically overpowered, or is it really a technique problem? And then we can help diagnose that problem and try to solve it. Also answers a lot of questions from athletes. So if they say, okay, well, what am I supposed to do here? Well, refer to your technique manual. Okay, we have all that information mapped out for you, so then everybody can be on the same page. Coaches, everybody's really using the same type of language with that. Okay, that improves the learning process, especially if you can visually show them. Okay, it's a different story if you're as an athlete, you're generally a physical learner and also a very visual learner. So you want to give them this opportunity. So here, written opportunity to learn. This is a watching opportunity to learn. They can also watch film. You can also explain it to them. They can also physically do it in practice. There's a ton of different ways that they can learn this stuff. That's really what we want here. All right, and then probably the most important thing that I talk about all the time in a lot of my videos and my courses connects the process to the outcome. We are process focused. If you're not process focused, you're doing it wrong, in my opinion, right? I'm not the world's leading expert in things like this, but I for sure believe in this particular thing. If we are executing our techniques properly, right, that is going to lead us to the outcome. The outcome is we make the block, right? We score a touchdown. But how do we get there? We get there by doing the details right, the process. This burst release is a part of that route. This is a part of the process. So if we can get this release here, great. Okay, now we have the ability to actually get the outcome that we want, which is catching that touchdown here. So we want to always connect this there, and you can also grade that stuff as well. That's a whole different conversation, but you can always grade your players' techniques if everything is defined. All right, next thing here, let's take a look at this step-by-step process. So for every run concept, identify each unique movement and block. Do some research, okay? Include your position coaches with this. Define how you want that movement to be done, and then throw that information into a technique manual. And then you do the same thing when it comes to the pass game stuff as well. So you can do that with your quarterback, throwing mechanics, you do it with receivers, you do it with running backs, with the footwork. There's a ton of stuff, the type of cuts as well that they're gonna make. So a lot of that stuff is gonna be included in this, and this is only gonna make you just way smarter as a coach to actually sit down and do this research, okay? It's awesome. Alrighty, next thing, moving along here. Step 8, creating the naming system. Again, I have that YouTube video, so go watch that. I'll probably link it to this one, but that one is very, very in-depth with this. So again, I'm not gonna spend too much time here, but purpose, okay? We wanna simplify our communication and make the playbook easier to learn for players. Okay, we can also improve the adaptability within our offense. We talked about that with the tags. Okay, when it comes to formations, you can also do that with your concept tags, right? We might say, just for example here, we might have like, if we go spread right and we call a smash concept, if we have the naming system set up in a way where when we call smash, it also tells us what to do on the backside. So it's a full field concept. And if we want to vary that, we can say smash curl, whatever it is. So we can have the naming system set up in a way that just allows us to be way more adaptable with what we're doing, okay? And then last thing here, we want to optimize for the tempo that we want to operate at. Mentioned it before, same thing applies, okay? Change up your naming system to fit however, quickly or slowly, more detailed, more complex you want to be. All right, step-by-step process here. Decide on the type of system you want to create. So naming system or number system. Again, I really dive into it here. If you can kind of look at this, this says trips right Roger 33 drive. So 3, in this case 30s, that was a drop back X side, okay? 3 is the route, the second 3 is the route. So 33, 30 is drop backs X side, 3 is the 3 route, which is the out, and then we tag the drive concept. If we tighten the X up, I could say 37 drive, and he would run the 7 route, right? So that is an example of using a number system. But again, there's positives and negatives to everything. If you use a number system, then this could just be a little bit longer of a play call, all right? So then again, that's gonna change the tempo that you can really operate at. All right, so once you do that, step 1, then we're gonna map out the base structure, create our categories, okay? Fill out the code words and signals template, check for duplicates. This is, it's a silly thing to put in here, but it always happens, especially when you've been doing this for years and you've worked on multiple offenses. You end up using a lot of the same signals, right? I've used this thing for chargers. I've used that for flash. I've used it for a bunch of different things, right? Same signal. So in my head, I might put that in there 2 different times, and then I have to go back and fix it. Other thing you want to do is find ways to have simpler signals, okay? I had a story. I was using the Heisman pose as a signal that we called Crimson, and the quarterback wanted to audible to that. So that the greatest thing, he's on the field and he literally does the Heisman pose to check to an audible. And then after that, we're like, yeah, we got to change that. Like we can't have a situation like that. So we ended up changing that and making that simple, making the signal simpler. All right. And then we want to record a signal library that you can attach to your playbook. If you're putting it on Huddle, make sure you can slap it in there, or wherever you have it, a Google Drive, but just make sure your players can see that. And whoever your signaler is, make sure they know how to do it. If you have a sloppy signaler, it's going to create a lot of problems. So you want to be very detailed with how you do that if you're going to be using a signal system. Okay, now here's an example of this, just using the naming system. So Hoss, this is the offense that I give in the 2-day playbook course. Hoss, that concept, right? Then code word was hurricane. Then we have the signal, okay, the U, right? So you want to attach concept with the code word with the signal. Ideally, you can have a relationship between all 3 of these things, right? Ideally, you want to have that as well, but you might not necessarily have that, okay? So just keep that in mind. Alrighty, so now the next thing, we got step 9, creating your diagrams. All right, purpose for this. We want to solve more problems than we create, okay? Solve more problems than we create. I've seen way too many playbooks where you want your receiver to run a 5-yard out, and it's like this. And it's like, okay, well, that's actually 1 yard downfield. That is not a 5-yard out. Don't do that, right? You want to solve more problems than you create. Make sure your athletes see this and they say, oh, okay, so this is a hard cut here. Okay, this is going to be a hard cut, or it's a 2-step speed out if we're going to be in man coverage. Okay, this is going to be a speed drop. That is a technique from the technique manual. Okay, what's the progression? Okay, well, we want to have that in here. If it's middle field closed, then we're going to use deep black progression. So that means we're going to be here 1 to 2 to 3. If it's middle field open, then we're going to use the red progression 1 to 2 to 3. So we have the little triangle here. All right. Alert. Okay, this is just a situation. Hey, if we get a one-on-one matchup that we really like, we have a 6'3" guy out there and they put in a backup corner and the safety is not playing far enough and we think we can make that. Okay, let's go ahead and throw that. Or you can also alert a post first cover 4. You can have an alert as like a change. So we could say, hey, if we alert, then you run a post, and this would have to be like a dotted line or whatever it is. But you can set up your diagrams however you'd like. Just try to make them as detailed as possible. All right, next thing here, we look at this. So I always like to have this. Put your concept in here, put the code word in here, put the signal. I like including the concept. This is a big thing for me because this allows players to start studying the game holistically. Knowing what this route is, I have this here, I have a 5-yard out, I have a go ball. That's not the same thing as understanding what the stick concept is, okay? Now they know what the stick concept actually attacks and how, if he runs a slot fade and he runs a hitch, oh, hey, coach, that's basically a stick concept. Yeah, you're right. It basically is a stick concept. It's just a slot fade variation, okay? So it's just increasing their knowledge, which is going to really increase their interest level in what they're doing. A lot more buy-in. It's just way more fun that way as well. Okay, so next thing, we talked about a bunch of this. We also want to demonstrate professionalism, okay? So set the example for your players. Don't have a real sloppy playbook. I see a lot of sloppy playbooks, and it just screams unprofessional, okay? It doesn't take that much effort. really to create something that looks like this is not that much longer. It's just an extra 20% or something, but it makes a big difference in how it's perceived from your players, okay? So keep that in mind. Step-by-step process. So we're going to create our install folders, all right? There's two ways we can do it. We can either do one concept at a time, or we can knock out all of the base concepts first. So maybe we say our base formation is 2x2. So we're going to do 2x2 stick, 2x2 hoss, 2x2 smash, whatever it is. Or we can say we're going to do 2x2 stick, 3x1 stick, 3x2 stick. So you can set that up however you'd like, but essentially just create the folders. Two ways to do it. Pick one, continue the next step. Actually, that would be step 2. Ignore that. Continue step 2, and then double check your diagrams before you share them with your athletes, okay? And considerations, already talked about it. Details, details, details. Okie dokie. So last step here, putting it all together, okay? Purpose, we want this to be a one-stop shop for all answers. So if my athletes have a question, they should be able to go in here and find it. Here's our offensive fundamentals. Here's any of our defensive breakdowns, okay? By the way, these aren't my players. This is my own personal huddle account that I have coaches join. So it's the coaches who are slacking. It's not my players slacking. My players don't have access to this, okay? This is just for coaches. I have a huge all 22 library that I have a subscription for. So, but yeah, obviously the play cards are not being used as well as they could be, right? So we have the fundamentals, we have understanding the defense, we have all of our procedures mapped out. These are our formations and tags, the pre-snap movement, run game, RPO. So if my players want to know something, they can just jump in here and take a look at it, okay? This is also a really good reference, not only for the players, okay, but also for the coaches, okay? Because depending on what level you're coaching at, you might have a ton of assistant coaches who aren't fully bought in. It's all pro bono, so they're not going to be able to study as much as you'd like them to. That's just the reality of it. So you want to make sure that you give all this information to them in a way that they can easily find it and give answers to the players when, if a player asks their position coach for something, they should be able to have the answer or at least be able to get the answer. So keep that in mind. Next thing here, looking at the step-by-step process. So we want to map out the installs in the playbook section. So that's essentially, this is why I have this. On Huddle, use the 01 dot, because if you just do 1, 2, 3, it ends up screwing it up. So this is a nice way to set that up. But map these out, which ones you want to use. I have one more usually, and I believe it's trick plays. I just didn't screenshot it because it would have been a weird thing there. But set those up, then choose the format you want to deliver it. Are you going to give a digital playbook? Are you going to print everything in a PDF? Are you going to put everything only online? There's a ton of different ways to do it, and there's not really a right way to set that up. So you can share it however you'd like. I've usually done this. I think this is the simplest way to do it. You can also attach videos to each of the play cards that you have in there to give here's the play card, here's a video example of this working, and then you have all the rules written down beneath of it, okay? When I was in college, we actually had a real binder that was the full thing printed out. It was all created probably on PowerPoint or something like that. But this is just a very efficient way, just using Huddle is a very efficient way to share the playbook. And then what I also like to do is when I do an install, okay, I actually record, just like I'm talking to you right now, I will record myself going over this play, right? We'll go over this whole play and I'll just have a video of me explaining the stick concept and I give that to my players, okay? So that's another thing, just a little side note here. All right, so choose a format, prep, what is gonna be shared first. Generally, I'd like to say that, we're gonna start with whatever install 1 is. You will not have, okay, there's two different things here. You'll have these installs. These stay long-term, right? And these can be accessible at any moment to players. But you'll have your week 1 install, your week 2 install, week 3 install, because you're not installing, the reason for this, you're not installing your entire run game on week 6 or your RPOs, not all of them, right? You're gonna install one run play, you're gonna install 2 quick pass games, you're gonna install 1 drop back, you're gonna have it set up like that. So you need to have 2 different folders or sections of folders of how you do that, okay? And then adapt the installs, okay, as you move forward. Whatever your original plan is, I guarantee you it's not gonna work out that way. You're gonna be slow, there's gonna be speed bumps, whatever it is, you're gonna have something that you need to tweak, okay? Even if you start with a template, you're still gonna need to tweak it, okay? So Just keep that in mind, that you should be adaptable with this whole process. So that's basically the entire process in a single quick video. Obviously, there's a lot more detail that we could get into, enough to turn that into an entire course, which is actually what I did. It's called my 2-day offensive playbook course. Over a 2-day period, it takes you through every single step of the process in way more detail so that you can basically just follow along and create your playbook as you go. But that's not even the best part about this course. When you sign up, I don't just give you the how-to, I also give you my exact playbook that I've been using to average over 30 points per game and have 5 championship appearances throughout my international career. And yes, you heard that right. I literally give you my playbook. This is something that no other coach really does because they want to save the best bits of information for themselves. But I give you the code words, the hand signal library, the play cards. I even give you my favorite play calls that consistently get me first downs and touchdowns every game. You can even import this entire playbook directly into your Huddle account if you want to. I give you the Huddle install codes. And not only that, I also give you a behind the scenes look into how I set everything up, so you can make sense of it while you're working through it. The last thing that you need is another resource that you can't actually do anything with, so I tried to make this as practical as possible. So a quick recap: you can either use my exact playbook, build your own out from scratch, just following the step-by-step process, or you can take my playbook, edit it, and just kind of delete whatever it is that you want and adjust it to your level of complexity, and now you got your entire playbook built in just 2 days. Each of those strategies will work, and this system doesn't just work for me. Frank is coaching at the Pop Warner level. He reached out to me and let me know that his team is using this to average 38 points per game. Seth is using this at the high school level to lead his league in yards. Boris is coaching internationally and just shattered a ton of records and won himself a championship. And Rich is using this with his flag team at the 7th and 8th grade level, and they're having a blast. And these are just a few of the hundreds of stories that I hear from coaches who are using this system. So don't waste any more time trying to build your own playbook and go through that whole process without the simplicity of having this course guide the whole way. All you really got to do is click the link below. It'll be in the description somewhere, maybe even on the screen. Hope to see you inside the course.